The rain fell in cold, steady sheets over Long Beach, California. The streets shimmered under the dim glow of street lamps, and people hurried past with umbrellas, eager to reach the warmth of home. But Jim Rohn had no home to go to. He sat hunched beneath a worn-out awning behind a diner, shivering inside a threadbare coat. At 25, he had lost everything: his apartment, his job, and most painfully, his self-respect. A crumpled photo of his family was tucked in his coat pocket. It was all he had left. Jim stared at the image through the fog of his breath and whispered, "I'm sorry I failed you." Jim hadn't always been on the streets. Just a few years earlier, he was a bright, ambitious young man from Idaho, with dreams as big as the sky. He moved to California with hope in his chest and a promise in his heart that he would make something of himself. But reality was less forgiving than dreams. He jumped from job to job, retail, warehousing, door-to-door sales, but he couldn't find his place. And then came the layoffs, the unpaid bills, the eviction notice taped coldly to his apartment door. His pride kept him from calling home. His shame made him avoid old friends. And so he wandered, searching for food, shelter, and some meaning in the mess he had become. One night, as Jim scavenged for a warm spot in a subway station, he saw an older man sharing a sandwich with another homeless stranger. They were laughing. In the middle of despair, they had found something Jim had lost: a sliver of joy. That image stuck with him. A week later, hungry and exhausted, Jim wandered into the back of a hotel ballroom where a seminar was taking place. It was warm, dry, and filled with the scent of coffee. The event was free, hosted by a company he didn't recognize. The man on stage had charisma that could silence a storm. "Your life doesn't get better by chance," the speaker said. "It gets better by change." The words struck Jim like thunder. For the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him. That speaker was Earl Shoaff, a successful entrepreneur and motivational speaker. After the event, Jim waited by the stage doors, awkward and uncertain. When Shoaff finally came out, Jim stepped forward and said with a shaky voice, "I don't have money. I don't have much of anything, but I want to learn. Please, will you teach me?" Shoaff looked at him, not through him, but into him, with the kind of gaze that sees beyond appearances. "Meet me tomorrow, 7 a.m. sharp. Wear your best smile." That one meeting turned into many. Shoaff didn't give Jim money. He gave him something far more powerful: a blueprint for personal growth. Jim read every book Shoaff recommended, scribbled notes through every seminar, and followed advice to the letter. He got a job selling vitamins for Shoaff's company. Not glamorous, not easy, but it was honest work. The first week, Jim earned $57. He nearly cried. But Shoaff wasn't focused on sales. He was focused on mindset. "You can't change your circumstances until you change yourself," he told Jim over and over. "Become more valuable, and the world will value you more." Slowly, Jim began to change. He worked on himself, his habits, his language, even how he dressed. He carried a small notebook, writing down every idea that inspired him. He started speaking to groups at churches, schools, and community centers. Shoaff saw in Jim what Jim couldn't yet see in himself: a teacher, a speaker, a leader. Then, one spring evening, Shoaff handed Jim a box filled with his personal notes, books, and letters. "I'm dying, Jim," he said quietly, "but everything I've learned is now yours." Shoaff passed away a few months later, but his legacy burned bright in Jim's heart. Jim worked relentlessly, not just to build his business, but to build himself. In just 6 years, the man who had once begged for food on the streets became a millionaire. But Jim didn't stop there. He began speaking to small groups, then larger ones, schools, colleges, corporations, stadiums. With every speech, every story, he shared Shoaff's wisdom and his own trials, always returning to one central message. It's not what you get that makes you valuable. It's what you become. Jim helped millions understand the power of personal development. He mentored young leaders, taught the importance of goal setting, financial independence, and the value of kindness. One of his students was a young man named Tony Robbins, who went on to inspire millions more. Years later, at a sold-out event in Dallas, a young man waited in line to meet Jim. He held an old, dog-eared copy of the 5 major pieces to the life puzzle. Tears welled in his eyes. "My father was in prison. My mom worked 3 jobs. We lived in a car for a year," the young man said. "But your words, they gave me hope. I'm graduating college this year. I got a scholarship because of an essay I wrote based on your speech. You saved my life, Mr. Rohn."